cells have DNA, the amount of different shapes it can take when your blood barrier sphere around.
By 6th Street, and they were out the next day. The district attorney released them because they were black.
The parallel of that between if all your organs had a different density of what made them go bad, all those cells could be recorded. And that's why in the Bible it says over your belly is like flowing rivers. If all your eating your entire life was just equal to one gnarly meal, that's what rivers would be. And that is the only calculation of how cells are inside each organ and how good they are at reacting at a certain blow. And that's why in video games it's so important to understand hitboxes. Is the entire body or mid-low or center or high, mid-low or high hitboxes. If all your organs were shutting down because you fell in water and your central nervous system had a shape of all the center organs before you were KO'd. Moving around, if you're just one meat on a stick, is a literal statistic of body behavior that's recorded as your DNA, and it can only do so many things under pressure. That's why knowing PSI is important when your neck is moving like a tail whip of an animal. That's a really high PSI. But how quick is a cell's response is your own split decision, because a cell's a divination of your entirety, because once you cease to exist, your cells stop having energy in them. So it's relation to a battery, and when Matrix guy says that runs a battery, is a change of rate in time. And so that's a giant statement, very much the entire universe being material sense. Could say for the exchange rate of what the outer layer took to get to the inner layer. And so at such points, it's just as though saying like, you have two hitboxes, your central nervous system and your epidermis if it's broken. How many hit points does it take with direct contacts in order to make those things break connection to each other, which would probably be how someone would get knocked out. Not being put under like water or fire, but if it were, it would be equal to a certain amount of time you're under it with the duration of like food. And then water is like 4 days and then 4 weeks. So to sum it up, that's when like if all Pokemon having being one hitbox was equal to your neck, one tail whip if at a hit point that would exceed a concussion due to their blood barrier sphere around your skull. If your neck exceeded a certain PSI, is a literal statistic of any hit done on one hitbox if that was all equal to one neck. And that's why each Pokemon can be looked at that in that way. But in the Bible it's two ways. It's like Daniel in the lion's den, where like nothing bad happened despite the odds of something bad occurring are like a lot. And then the people in the furnace who the odds of something bad burning alive were occurring, but it didn't. Those are exceptions in like the hit point system with hitboxes. Those are called misses, and in Pokemon, half the attacks miss. Enough to make an indefinite concussion. So the amount of cells around that area that would allow that much PSI is a literal statistic in harmonic functions. If you look at that being a hitbox, that would exceed a certain hit point. And that's what in Pokemon, they're all just one hitbox. From a tail whip that makes them KO, you know what I'm saying? And that's why PSI is important with knowing pressure points. Because in your neck, if you whip it hard enough, it's equal to just whiplash of an entire blood barrier sphere. If someone had a problem at the start of every time you saw them and their life was endangered, so they had to bring back to life, meaning their nose had to have a sedative put under it to make them conscious again. This happens on a lot of crime films on TV, but instead of a scent under a nose, they had to come up with other ways to bring them back to consciousness, like for people who have lupus, they put icing in their mouth. So what other things can you do to wake people up? The opposite, sedative. I'm saying sedative like it's that anti-venom. But for King Kong was to put like this stuff that you put in people's face and they fall asleep. So the amount of that is equal to curvatures on land masses, which then you have a monster film if you relate that to people's organs. If the organs need a certain amount of them working in order for the person to be conscious, but are triggered just by a sedative. Today I'm going to be talking a lot of hitboxes. You might not understand the amount of different pressures are, but lo and behold, it's interesting to note people who work for a check have to use the bathroom outside in some places. That being said, using an outhouse outside is the same as a shed, and if there's anywhere in the Philippines that there's sheds, it's easy to jump on top of them because they're so short. And so one prerequisite for hitboxes is that you could just have, of course, them all be monster hits where one hit would make the person unconscious. And this is a little prerequisite to Pokemon. The touching upon Pokemon of Ditto, the one that is a mime and he makes mirrors.